welcome to KellyApy, a self-help podcast. Well, about a year ago, I met my friend Ellie in a 12-step recovery program. Now, she, like anyone who finds her way into recovery, had been through the ringer and was seeking a way out of the hell she had found herself in. I've gotten to witness Ellie's transformation from hopeless addict to a shining light of recovery. I mean, if you were to look at Ellie today, you would never in a million years know that she was in a battle for her life a year ago. Yes, 12-step recovery played a major role in her transformation, but it turns out Ellie is also a certified yoga instructor. So she's been able to use the skills she attained as a yoga teacher to help ease her addiction and find balance. She has shared the power of yoga to help ease the pain of addiction with several rehab facilities as well. So I think this can be such a wonderful way for the alcoholic addict to find relief while working on their sobriety. Ellie has agreed to come on, share her story, and talk about the benefits of yoga to the recovering addict. Please welcome Ellie. Welcome, Ellie. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to talk with you today about this.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me today.
So let's talk a little bit about how you found yoga. I mean, you're a yoga instructor. What was it that drew you to yoga in the first place?
Yeah, my yoga journey is quite long. I started doing yoga in my living room with a VHS tape by Cassie Smith. You'll remember Cassie Smith.
Yes.
And I just immediately fell in love with it. At the time, I was in a really toxic relationship. And just really not in a good place. And I found that, putting the tape in, getting down on the carpet and doing these poses and going through these classes just kind of made me feel better. There was just something about it that I enjoyed moving. And there's like a breath to a movement in what is called vinyasa yoga, which is breath and movement together. And it just kind of sucked me in. Over the course of the next many years, I ended up getting married to someone else, thank goodness. And I had 2 kids who were quite big. And I actually started taking Pilates classes, which is also breath and movement together, which I enjoyed to kind of get myself back in shape. And at that studio, the woman taught yoga classes as well. And I was taking those. And one day she just said to me, "Hey, have you ever thought about teaching?" And it was like this light bulb went off over my head. I had never considered it. I was terrified, but I did go through my first of 3 yoga teacher trainings with her. And that led me to where I am today in being a yoga teacher now for almost 17 years.
Wow. Okay. So you've been a yoga instructor for 17 years. Now, here's the interesting thing that I find with you, Ellie. You're in recovery for a year now. Is that about right?
That is right.
So 16 years while you were doing yoga, you were also struggling with addiction. Is that, tell us a little bit about how that mixed.
Yeah. So again, it was that feeling that I got at the end of a yoga class that kept drawing me back to my mat again and again. It's meditative, it's calming. For me, it really quieted the noise in my head, and even more profoundly, it quieted my very negative self-talk, because that was just going on in my head 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was on my mat that I kind of had my first glimmer of what I didn't know then to be a connection to my higher power. And so that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will, of pushing me towards doing this on an ongoing basis. Now, I hadn't yet dipped my toe in the water of 12-step recovery, which obviously is more helpful in the addiction aspect of things. But my first glimmer of what I now know to be my higher power and that connection to that higher power was on my yoga mat. There was just something really magical that I felt at the end of a class, laying there, feeling like I was part of something else, feeling less alone, and feeling deeply connected to myself in a loving way versus a really toxic way.
Yeah. Because that's just the thing with the addict and the alcoholic, especially, we beat ourselves up. And it seems like the brain is constantly going in that obsessive manner. So I imagine that yoga really helped to kind of slow that down and calm everything down.
Yeah, it absolutely did. And I didn't really realize it for what it was in the moment, but hey, whatever helps, helps. And then when I started teaching, I think also that was kind of like a precursor to coming into 12-step recovery, right? Because for me, teaching is a version of service work. I'm giving of myself, I'm being selfless, I'm getting out of my own will, I am helping others. And in the beginning, I didn't realize how much I was helping others. And over the years, I've really just come to see what a gift it is, not just for me to be teaching, but for the people that take my classes and come to me and tell me what it means to them in their lives.
So what are some of the benefits of doing yoga? Just like, suppose you're not an addict, but for anybody who wanted to do yoga.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, the physical benefits are what most people think about. You've got people that want to improve their flexibility. You've got people that want to improve balance. There's a lot of standing on one foot that goes on in yoga. There's strength that can be gleaned from a lot of the different disciplines in the yoga world. But on a more deeper level, yoga helps with focus, mental awareness. It helps with insomnia. It helps you sleep better. It provides a jump start for the central nervous system by giving it downtime when you're taking class. And a little more science geeky, but it stimulates the prefrontal cortex, which is, I know we weren't really talking about recovery at this point, but that gets heavily compromised for those people who are using substances. But
well, that's interesting. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's a direct connection between yoga and healing with the addict and alcoholic with the
yes, 100%. I have been through a 28-day treatment facility twice. At both of those facilities, yoga was offered at least once a week. Pretty much everybody that I've talked to that has been through a treatment program has said that there have been yoga classes offered. And that's because the postures and the breath work offer so many ways that are instrumental in recovery. It improves focus and awareness, which I said, but this is especially helpful for recovering addicts, allowing them to maintain concentration, allowing them to stay mentally strong and focused on their recovery goals. It also emphasizes an awareness of thoughts and feelings without the need to get really involved in trying to numb them out with substances, right? It just kind of lets you feel your feels when you're on your yoga mat. Yoga has been shown to reduce cravings for those that are in early recovery. By producing a calmer state of mind, which goes a long way toward keeping cravings at bay. And then also after withdrawal, the brain is essentially starved of dopamine, right? Our dopamine levels just crash when we're right out of using. And yoga has been shown to naturally increase levels even more so than other things we do in day-to-day life. As I mentioned, stimulating the prefrontal cortex, it's the part of the brain that's responsible for self-control. It gets totally trashed and compromised by substance use. And then I did mention insomnia, but like for me especially, I had the hardest time sleeping the first time I came into the rooms and I went to rehab. I mean, I couldn't sleep for anything.
Nobody can. Nobody ever can. It's always.
And so it's just really helpful. And then, I mean, for me, and for a lot of people that take it beyond the yoga that they might do in rehab or a little bit right after they get out, it provides a place to emotionally heal. Like really just start to connect with yourself on a deeper level and in a loving and kind way.
Yeah, because yeah, we do beat ourselves up so much. So it's kind of like an effort to, I mean, we talk about the, in 12-step recovery, it being a spiritual solution. And yoga, it's very much got us, it's for the body, mind, and soul, as I understand it. It
Yeah,
really,
absolutely. For me, you just took the words right out of my mouth. It was this connection to myself, which was something I never had in addiction. Um, it was this feeling of coming home and feeling comfortable in my own skin, whereas before I had just used drugs and alcohol to be anybody but me. But it's this physical healing, literal physical healing that you get from the postures, and then so you're getting this physical benefit from it, but then also you're getting a spiritual benefit from it as well, whether it's just a more loving relationship with yourself or whether it's getting you into a meditative state where you can connect with your higher power a little more easily. In the doctor's opinion, it says, but we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic, which leaves out the physical factor, is incomplete. Right. And so, like I said,
yeah.
yoga for me gives me the best of both worlds, healing physically and growing spiritually. I always joke and tell people I'm going to church when I'm going to take a yoga class.
So, are there different types of yoga that are better for a recovering addict? Like if I say, "Oh, I want to go and take some yoga classes to help with my recovery," would there be a specific type that would be better for me to look for, or is there like, because I know there's all kinds of different types of yoga, right?
There's 52 million different kinds of yoga from just meditation classes to chair yoga to
Goat
150.
yoga.
Yeah, goat
Yep.
yoga. You can be in a 115-degree room for an hour and a half at a time. It really
Oh
just
yeah.
kind of depends on what, obviously it depends on what your body is capable of doing. If you are not a person who's ever really physically been active and you were beating the hell out of your body with drugs and alcohol, then you're not going to want to jump into a power heated yoga class because you're going to
That,
hate it.
that would be
Um,
me.
yeah. Some people love the challenging classes like myself, and some people love the really slow paced, it's called yin yoga, where you hold postures for 4 or 5 minutes at a time. It's just kind of trying it out and seeing what fits. I would start on the easy side of anything if you were going to be trying it out for the first time. But I always tell my students, especially at the beginning of a hard class, I give them permission to take it easy that day if they need to, and remind them that even if they just laid on the floor on their back for an entire hour and breathed deeply through their nose, they would be doing a form of yoga.
I wish you would have been my first yoga instructor. The first time I took a yoga class, Ellie, listen to this. My friend invited me to go to yoga in LA, and I was like, sure. And I had no idea. I thought you just sat in like cross leg position and said Om the whole time. So I wore a dress
Oh my gosh.
to yoga. And to my surprise, they're like doing handstands. And I was like, this is not going to work out very well. But it really did open my eyes to just, oh my gosh, there's so much more to yoga than what what we think there is.
Yeah, it's more than just trying to put your foot behind your head. I have people that come at me from both ends of the spectrum. People like you, before your first class, who think, like these super athlete types at the gym. They're like, I don't want to go to yoga. You're just going to sit there and like chant for an hour. And I'm like, oh, really? Come take my class. And then you've got people that think, oh, I'm so stiff, I can't even touch my toes. I can't go to yoga. But those are the people that should be going to yoga. Or I hate meditation. I don't want to go and sit and be quiet. Well, there's probably a reason that you hate that. And maybe that's a reason that you should be going to yoga.
Uh-huh. So listen, you said we were talking a little bit before we started this, and you said that a lot of the people that you find in yoga are actually have some form of connection to the recovery world.
Yeah, I found that well before I came into the rooms. I have a lot of friends that were colleagues, yoga teachers. Some are still teaching, some have moved on to other things because you don't make a lot of money as a yoga teacher. But I would say maybe a third of them were in some form of a recovery program. A third of them should have been in some sort of recovery program. And I don't mean that in like a casting stones kind of way, but it's interesting that, you know, they weren't at kickboxing, they were at yoga. So there's something magical that happens in that room that calls to, you know, the people that are feeling like there's a hole inside of them that needs to be filled. And that's a wonderful place to go because it fills it with something positive. And so, yeah, I've definitely come across a lot of folks that have been on a path toward and a path through recovery in the rooms of yoga classes.
That was such a great point you just brought up, you know, because with the with the alcoholic and addict, it is there, you feel like you have a hole in the soul that you're trying to fill with something. And when you're in the active addiction, you don't know, you're looking for whatever is going to relieve that and fill that hole and kind of calm down the crazy. So that makes perfect sense why people would kind of seek out yoga to help them with that. That is fascinating. So listen, do you teach this at rehab facilities as well now, Ellie, or how?
I do. I've done some service work over the years with going into rehab facilities and working with people that are actually in, you know, a drug 28-day program or an alcohol 28-day program. And it's interesting, right? Because I'm trying to think, none of them were ever required to be there, but you could see by the look on their faces that like half of them did not want to be there. And then by the end, usually I've won them all over, if not most of them. I have also done some volunteer work at like battered women's shelters. And I mean, that's just heartbreaking, but it's just so beautiful to watch people, maybe for the first time ever in their entire lives, close their eyes, focus on their breath, and change how they're feeling, right? Because we are always in control of our breath. It's not the other way around. And we can significantly change in any moment what's going on inside of us physically by how we're breathing, right? If I'm breathing really quickly through my mouth, my heart's going to be racing. It's that fight or flight that we're supposed to have. But when I close my mouth and I breathe slowly through my nose, my central nervous system calms down, my blood pressure lowers, my heart rate lowers. All of these things that you can give these people that are struggling as tools to help them. And whether or not they end up going to a yoga class that's 115 degrees, it doesn't matter. But you've given them just, you know, a tool that they can use, especially in early recovery, to help them when they get stressed out, to help them when they're having cravings, to help them when they're dealing with, you know, the repercussions of their life before they came into the rooms. And so, like I said, you know, whether it's just breathing or doing some gentle stretching and just being good to yourself, it's just magic.
Now, you know, that's interesting because when I was, I had heard in the room, somebody at one of the meetings said, breathe in God, blow out fear and anxiety. And so I started doing that when I would, you know, start having my little panic, whatever, anxiety creep up, especially in early recovery that happens. And that was super powerful, just kind of closing my eyes, breathing in God, and then just blowing out the fear and anxiety. So that's a yoga concept, it seems like.
100%.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's like a quick little easy one on the go to do if you're ever out there. Are there some tips you can give like the addicts or alcoholics out there listening who might be interested in pursuing yoga, but maybe they're not sure they can do it? What would you say to them?
I would say just start easy. Don't do something that your mind immediately goes, oh my God, that's going to suck, right? So if you're wired to think that meditation is going to be horrible, don't go to a meditation class. If you don't like hot, if you don't like being hot, don't go to a hot yoga class. I would say maybe go with a friend, go with someone that you trust, or maybe somebody that does go to yoga on a regular basis, just to kind of have someone there as a wingman, if you will, or a wing woman. And just be open to the experience. I mean, I always say in my classes, it's not yoga perfect, it's yoga practice. right? You know, and people get so hung up on, am I doing it right? Are people looking at me? And no one's looking at anybody. When you're standing on one foot and you're covered in sweat, you're not checking out somebody 3 rows back and 2 spots over to see if they're doing it right. You have to let go of the attachment of trying to do something and put it into a bucket. It's either right or it's wrong. It's, you know, it's good or it's bad, because that takes away from the whole experience. And the experience is just to be there in the moment, which is also something that addicts don't do very well, right? We're very, very often way out in the future or way back in the past, and we aren't where our feet are.
And the other thing you pointed out, which is classic addict alcoholic, is perfectionism. You know, they constantly say in 12-step recovery, progress, not perfection, because as any addict or alcoholic, if we can't do it perfect, then we beat it's another excuse to beat yourself up. Oh, see, look, it's right. I am worthless. I can't do anything right. And that's such a good point you bring up there, Ellie, is that no, you know, it's a practice of really doing it. You're competing against yourself to get better, not other people. And nobody's looking at you. I gotta admit, I laughed when you said that, because when I go to a yoga class, I'm like, oh, people are looking at me and they're thinking, this poor girl, she's not flexible.
Yeah, I mean, we all do it, right? And again, there's that right back to, it's yoga practice, not yoga perfect. You know, you're not going to ever stop wondering if people are looking at you, but you can make those occurrences be less frequent, right? You, instead of paying attention 100%, maybe you're only paying attention 50% to those thoughts that pop up in your mind. And then just going back to what you were saying about, you know, advice to give to people that are getting into it for the first time. Yoga can be done by anyone, anytime, anywhere. You don't need to be on a yoga mat. You don't need to be in a yoga studio. You don't need to have your Cassie Smith VHS tape in. You can literally sit in your car and close your eyes and just take some deep breaths, right? And you can call that yoga, or you can call that meditation. You can be sitting in your chair in your, you know, 72nd story office building for Bank of America, doing some twists and some side stretches to kind of just check out from your computer and check in with what's going on with you physically. So just letting go of all of the labels that you might need to put with something like yoga are, I think, the most helpful to just getting started.
Yeah, because there is kind of as you were talking about it earlier, there's kind of yoga, what is this about? And then maybe contempt prior to investigation aspect of it, that addicts, you know, oh, this is going to suck. But it turns out, oh, no, this is actually really good for me. This feels good. This is helping me. And I need to keep doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone into some places to do volunteer work where they don't even want to call it yoga for that very reason, because people are going to go, ugh, and they're not going to want to have anything to do with it. So they call it stress reduction, or they call it meditation practice, or they call it like breathing techniques. When I was at that battered women's shelter when I lived up in Minneapolis, I mean, I went in there thinking I was going to do gentle yoga with them, but sadly, because of the folks that I was working with up there, the women, you know, one woman had her arm broken so many times by her husband that she couldn't be on all fours, and one woman was so overweight she couldn't like sit upright very well. So I literally just laid everybody down on the floor on their back, and we just did breathing, and they loved it. And I would come back every 2 weeks, and they would be so excited for, you know, what they were calling yoga with Ellie. And so it's just, you know, anything that makes you feel good, and that breath work really just is so magical.
Has there ever been like a time when you were teaching a class, Ellie, and somebody kind of had like this emotional breakthrough in the middle of like the class where they just kind of give me a story about that.
Oh my gosh, it's happened so many times. I'll start with a fun kind of positive story. I had a gentleman that would come take my class, and he was a big dude. I mean, not big like out of shape. He was a huge dude. He probably could have bench pressed a car. And there's a pose called eagle pose where you're supposed to kind of wrap your arms up like licorice ropes, and you have to get one elbow under the other. And he just always tried so hard to get it, but he was getting a little closer and a little closer every time. And one day he kind of got his arms swinging wildly, like building up this momentum and velocity to give it a whirl, and he got it. He like yelled out at the top of his lungs. He was like, "Oh my God." And it was the cutest thing, because he had been trying to get there for so many months. And, he, in his mind, had achieved something he didn't think he was capable of doing. It's interesting, right? Because you go to an exercise class or you go to a yoga class and, you're in your own world and you've got your own things going on. And so you're teaching and you've got 10, 20, 50 people in a room that are all in a different place, that are all dealing with different things. So I've seen the spectrum. I've had people get up and storm out of the room. You try your best not to take that personally. You don't know what's going on in their life. I've had people come up to me bawling at the end of class, both feeling wonderful and feeling devastated. A woman came up to me and said that her brother had just passed away the day before.
Oh, wow.
And she had gone to class, like hoping that it was going to make her feel better. And I gave her a big hug, and I'm getting goosebumps right now just talking about it. But I was just so happy for her that she knew that that was going to help her feel better. And I felt so honored that she came and took my class to kind of get where she needed to be. I've had people where I can see them in a pose. There's a pose called child's pose where you're basically on all fours and then you just like lay down, put your forehead on the floor with your arms out in front of you. And I've seen people's backs moving in a way that it's very obvious to me that they're crying.
Wow.
And so you just don't know. Maybe they just broke up with their boyfriend. Maybe, they just found out their dog has got cancer. It's just all these things going on. And yet we're all in the room together being quiet. And I've never had anyone walk out and say they felt worse than they did when they walked in the room.
Yeah. It's almost like it's a release for some emotions that like might have been locked up and tied up, that yoga just helps unlock them and release them. So you don't have to carry them.
I had a yoga, there's energetic centers to the body in the world of yoga, and the pelvis and the hips are where these kind of very deep, raw emotions supposedly live, whether you want to buy into that or not, right? So like fear, attachment, a feeling of trust, and safety all comes from in there. And I had a woman, a teacher, a mentor of mine once say that the hips were like the Home Depot of emotions, like everything was in there. And I've had people tell me that, we'll be in a long held hip opening pose toward the end of class and they'll be like, I saw something, or I like had this vision, or I had this memory come to me of something really amazing in my life. Or all of a sudden, like I just let go of being pissed off at my ex-husband for the first time ever. And so there, everybody's journey is different, but there's definitely some cool stuff that happens.
Well, you know what? Guess what? We are at the end of our time, Ellie. I knew this would fly by. It always does. But this has been such an awesome conversation, and I think it's really now I like want to go up to the Y and jump in a yoga class.
Well, you should. I'll come with you.
I'm going to try not to. I'm going to remember your yoga practice, not yoga perfect.
That is correct.
So I'm going to end the podcast as I do. I like for my guests to leave the audience with a message of hope to help and heal. So Ellie, what's your message out there to the listener that is maybe early in recovery, not sure what's going on and not sure if yoga can help them? What's your message to them to help them heal today?
Well, I had a quote that I wanted to share. And I think it ties in perfectly with what you're asking for. So the quote is, "The yoga pose is not the goal. Becoming flexible is not the goal. Standing on your hands is not the goal. The goal is serenity, balance, truly finding peace in your own skin." And that's a quote by a woman named Rachel Brathen, who's better known on social media and in the literary world as Yoga Girl. And I just really loved that. The recovery and yoga for me, it is about that. It's about finding balance, and it's really about finding serenity and just finding peace being who I am. Because for so many years, I just hated who I was. And I've found a way to a much more fundamental and beautiful relationship with myself through both working 12-step recovery and being active in my yoga practice.
I love it. And that can happen for anyone too. I mean,
Yeah,
and
anybody.
I can attest when I saw Ellie walk in, she is not the same person I saw her a year ago. So
Oh,
yoga
thank
and
you.
12-step recovery does work. Now, I also end with a quote as well. So I found one here from Rolf Gates. Are you familiar with Rolf Gates?
I love Rolf Gates.
Yeah, he is evidently a guru in the yoga world. And
He
so
is.
listen to this one, Ellie. He says, yoga is not a workout, it is a work in. And this is the point of spiritual practice, to make us teachable, to open up our hearts and focus our awareness so that we can know what we already know and be who we already are.
Oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's perfect. I really do love all of his writing. And that ties in perfect.
Ah, well, Ellie, thanks so much for taking the time to enlighten us with this yoga therapy for addicts. I mean, who knew? It makes perfect sense. So I'm so glad we got to have the conversation today.
I am too. Thank you so much for asking. I just hope that something I shared helps somebody out there. And if it does, then my work here today is done.
Yes, your work here is done, and I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. So thanks again, Ellie. To my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to KellyApy today. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe. We're going to be doing this for half an hour each week. And if you'd like more positive messages, you can check out my YouTube vlog, Monday Messages, hosted by me, Kelly Mahoney. Until next week, have a great week, and we'll see you next week for another edition of KellyApy. Bye.